Okay, Pentecost Sunday. Every Sunday we have offering in the church, and the plates come around, and that supports our church. However, 4 times a year we have a denominational offering for the PCUSA, Presbyterian Church USA. And that's why these little envelopes show up. And the Pentecost offering is now and always for children who are disadvantaged, at risk, or have other problems. It's a children's offering. So if you'd like to offer something special in addition, that's great, and that's what this envelope is for, and you can put it in with the other offering at that time. Join me in prayer. Dear God, thank you for the element of fun we have just being together, for young people whose lives unfold so quickly. Help us savor them and remember our pledge to be there and have their backs now and always. When we pray this on this Spirit Fire Sunday. Amen. Okay, there are quite a number of symbols for Pentecost that are age-old. Wind is a big one. The dove coming down is another one. But fire is also one of those, and I want to focus on fire. It's been said that some people, you think of religion and fire, your mind can go to some interesting places. Some people only have enough religion to make themselves miserable for that reason. They recall from the Bible places where it says, "Thou shalt not," and fire is the punishment that they're faced with. In their minds, religion is about what you aren't supposed to do. And in a wonderfully funny British movie called Cold Comfort Farm, a few people have seen, there's a hellfire and damnation preacher portrayed, and he's such a piece of work. At the opening of his sermon in this movie, he says the following to his congregation. They're all just trembling because he's terrifying. He says, "Have you come this Sunday to hear me tell you of the great crimson licking flames of hell?" You've come, dozens of you, haven't you, like rats to the granary. Well, you know what it's like when you burn your hand taking a cake out of the oven or lighting one of them godless cigarettes. It stings, doesn't it, with a fearful pain, aye, and you run to clap a bit of butter on it to take the pain away. Well, I'll tell you, there'll be no butter in hell. Well, I think it's really important on Pentecost Sunday to say that the Christian faith is more about fanning the flames of creativity than it is about quenching the fires of sin. That is definitely what the fire in the story that we read this morning before the advertisement about wine. Those tongues of fire resting on the heads of the disciples of Jesus are first and foremost the fires of imagination. That's why they come where they do. Previously, the disciples had been backward-looking. They've been fretful and regretful about the way they betrayed Jesus on his last day. And now they're looking forward. Now they're inspired. They have a vision borrowed from the Old Testament prophet Joel. And that vision goes this way. The day has come when God will pour out God's Spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your young men shall see visions, and even your old men shall dream dreams. And on my manservants and maidservants I will pour my Spirit in those days, and they shall prophesy, and I will show wonders in heaven above and signs on earth. And it shall come to pass that whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Well, the Pentecost story, as we heard it read this morning, is a retelling, in fact, of the Tower of Babel story from Genesis, because, so much of the New Testament is a reshaping and a borrowing of the stories from the Old. And in the Genesis story of Babel's Tower, out of their ambition to be great creators like God, the people, who made that tower are using their ingenuity to build that tower into the heavens in order to storm God's ramparts. And sensing their overweening pride, God quashes their attempt and then, as you will remember, confuses their languages so that they can never band together and do it again. Well, in the New Testament version, the story is turned absolutely inside out. The disciples who are so fearful and down in the mouth that Jesus is leaving earth have been hanging out indoors for weeks. And God's Spirit now rouses them, and they find miraculously that language is not an impediment anymore. They understand everyone. And with the teaching of Jesus taking hold in the world, the task of humans will now be for them to value what brings them together, not what drives them apart. That is the point of Jesus' ministry. Now, in one of the Gospels that didn't make it into the New Testament, but which has just as much integrity as the others, the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus speaks of this moment when a creative, world-embracing fire would be kindled. He says the following: I have cast fire upon the earth, and look, I'm watching over it until it blazes. Now, it's important to say that Jesus here is not talking about the fires of hell. If anything, he's talking about the fires of, wait for it, purgatory. Purgatory? Not many Protestants give any thought at all to purgatory, but it is a central part of the ancient Catholic tradition concerning the afterlife. It went out, of course, with the coming in of Protestantism. Protestants have a, show me the money attitude when it comes to things like purgatory. That is to say, if it can't be found explicitly in the Bible, then Protestants have said, forget about it. But let me give you the argument for it. It comes right out of the teachings of Dante Alighieri, which I used to teach years ago to undergrads. I promise you this is worth listening to. Dante's journey of discovery begins in hell, the Inferno. The events of his Divine Comedy detail this spiritual journey, kind of like a Lewis and Clark story. The first and most important revelation for Dante is found in the outer edge of hell, where the sins are the most minor. These are all sins of passion, like lust and gluttony. Deep in the heart of Dante's hell, though, further down, we find the worst sinners, those guilty of treachery. Judas is there, who betrayed Jesus, and so is Brutus and Cassius, who betrayed Julius Caesar. Betrayal is a sin against love itself, and that is what Dante considers the worst sin of all. On the outer edges of hell, again, where Dante begins, are those guilty of, not very much, just sexual sins. There, Dante meets two sinners named Paolo and Francesca, who recount the story of their adultery with such passion that Dante swoons. And that's because it's clear that that sin is the one he is most vulnerable to. But what you pick up hearing these sinners in hell recounting their personal stories is how enamored they all are with their sins. Paolo and Francesca are still so obsessed by their lust that they're caught up in this great swirling wind that mimics their inner passions that cause them to fall. And what you come to see here is that the sinners in hell are all narcissists. Every one of them. They can't think of anything but themselves. Secondly, you see that hell is not a place of punishment at all. This is really crucial. For Dante, it is a place where God, out of God's infinite love, lets narcissists have their narcissism. God lets them have the choices they've made in life, whatever they are, lets them have all their obsessions. God lets them, God out of God's great love, lets them have a space in hell away from God, a little apartment, so that they can be entirely on their own as they desire. Every one of them is entirely caught up in whatever passion on earth had held them in thrall. And so Dante visits personage after personage in hell, and they are, every one of them, still full of all the lust and all the anger and all the resentment that filled them on earth and made them do the things they did. And they go on and on describing to him in nauseating detail what they've been up to. And Dante feels nauseated by it all, listening to their whining. They go on and on about how the election was stolen from them and how their Twitter account was closed, and it's so terribly unfair. Blah, 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 whine, 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 until everybody says, enough. But happily, that's not the end of the Divine Comedy. In Volume 2, Dante gets to purgatory. And remember, we were talking about purgatory. And that's where he meets all these people who are guilty of all the same sins that the people in hell are guilty of. So what's the deal? The difference is that everyone in purgatory realizes something those in hell have not realized, and that is how stupid they'd been in their lives, how short-sighted, how obsessed, how boring they were. Every one of the people in purgatory is anxious to get shut of their angers and their resentments and their lost elections and all the other crap. All those passions that hamstrung them in life that they were so enamored with now mean nothing to them. Where the sinners in hell hate everybody and can't understand why everyone there isn't obsessed with them and their sins as they are, those in purgatory have this deep sympathy with all the others who had been disillusioned in life. They all do whatever they can to help one another purge themselves of their former pettiness that made them stumble in their life on earth. And it's so beautiful. And at the end of purgatory, in view of the gates of paradise, every one of them goes through a little fire. Remember, the sermon's about fire. That fire is what they go through to purify themselves. It's a purifying kind of crucible of a fire. And that fire terrifies Dante traveling through. But he's required to go through it too, because everybody in purgatory has to go through it to be purified for heaven. And go through it he does. And in that fire, his own petty passions and lusts, all those things that drove him so much on earth, they're subsumed now in the greater fire of God. His little fire of lust becomes part of the great love of God, and Dante realizes that there was nothing wrong with his passions on earth. They were simply, misguided attempts to love God. They were simply meant, in fact, to point him to the greatest passion for the one who created him. And so purgatory is seen to be a crucial step toward heaven, a place where human beings have a chance to look back just long enough to put their lives into perspective and rejoice that life on earth was merely an elementary school meant to get them ready for graduation to a deeper life God has ready for those who will want to embrace it in heaven. And here's the bottom line lesson of it all. You cannot be solitary and independent if you want to be close to God. Some people think that's what they have to do. No. If you want to be alone with yourself and your obsessions, hell is the place for you. Nice apartment. They take care of the garbage. You're all set. It's perfect. But if you want to be with God, you have to embrace community. And according to Dante, that is achieved for the great mass of humanity in the final purifying fire of purgatory. So think again about Pentecost. Tongues of fire resting on the heads of all the souls there, who begin for the first time in their lives to do what? First time in their lives to hear other people that they have dismissed. You know, those folks from Mexico and from Arab lands. And they begin hearing them as if they were speaking in their own language for the first time, understanding them, not just dismissing them. Community finally is becoming possible. All humanity, one. Borders meaning nothing. And you know, that's the reason that's the bottom line, is it's the bottom life of our lives. That is the goal for every one of us. And we began with those words in the service today from the late Thich Nhat Hanh, who said it better than anyone. We, you, and I are on this earth for one purpose, to wake up to the illusion all those folks in hell still have. What is the illusion? That our lives are separate and are meant to be separate. We are on this earth in order to wake up from the illusion of our own separateness. Now, if Dante doesn't persuade you of the need for purgatory, let me tell you one more story that has the same import. It's called the Parable of the Onion. And it comes out of the writings of Fyodor Dostoevsky. It's contained in his novel, The Brothers Karamazov, and maybe you read it some years ago. The parable in it is told by one of those brothers, the religious one, Alyosha, and it goes like this. Once upon a time, there was a peasant woman, and a very wicked woman she was. And she died, and she didn't leave a single good deed behind, it seemed. And so the devils caught her and plunged her into the lake of fire. Well, her guardian angel stood and wondered what good deed of hers he could remember in order to tell God that might get her out of hell. And he remembered one. She once pulled up an onion in her garden, he said, and she gave it to a beggar woman. Well, God answered, okay, find that onion and take it and hold it out to her in the lake where she's swimming around and let her take hold of it. And she can use it as a handle to be pulled out by you. And if you can pull her out of the lake, let her come to paradise. Well, he did just that. Found the onion, held it over the waters of fire, began pulling her out. She grabbed onto it. And he got her so far out that her toes were dripping with fire and water. At this point, other sinners in the lake saw what was happening. And seeing that she was being drawn out, they swam over to her, and one of them caught hold of her ankle so as to be pulled out with her and began coming up. And as that one was pulled out, another grabbed onto that one, and thus was created a chain of humanity rising out of hell's lake of fire, one after the other, higher and higher. But this was a very selfish woman. And so she began kicking the one right below her with her free foot. "I'm the one to be pulled out, not you. It's my onion, it's not yours," she said. And as she struggled and screamed and kicked, the onion broke apart, and the woman and the chain of all the others below her fell back into the lake of fire where she is still today. It's a parable. So the angel wept and went away, thinking that had she not struggled so selfishly, not only her, but all the sinners in hell might have been freed because of that one onion. We are on this earth in order to wake up from the illusion of our own separateness. The illusion that we are supposed to live fully independent lives as responsible. Let me say this again. The illusion that we are supposed to live fully independent lives is responsible for all the idiotic rhetoric that says that we have no room for any more migrants in the United States, when in fact our economy is sputtering. For what reason? For lack of hundreds of thousands more such people needed to staff our service industries and do jobs none of you and I want to do, right? That illusion is responsible for the intransigence on gun control legislation, because those against it say we need guns to protect ourselves from one another. To these who are stuck in the past with obsolete obsessions, whining constantly, the Bible presents this word of Pentecost hope. You may be stuck in the past, but consider those in the coming generations who aren't so selfish, who aren't so obsessed, who don't have the same delusions so many of us do, who aren't hung up about immigration, and realize that the gun lobby is just a big cancer on us all. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your young men will see visions of a very different world, and so will your daughters. Even some of your old men shall dream dreams. And on my maidservants and menservants, God says, to pour out my whole Spirit. Amen.